On today's Locked On Texans podcast, franchise tag talk on this Tuesday. Dalton Schultz, JG52. Who should stay? Who should get considered? And who should the Houston Texans allow to walk?
You are Locked On Texans, your daily Houston Texans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, Locked On Texans fans, listeners, and viewers to this Tuesday episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If this is your first time watching or listening to the Locked On Texans podcast, thank you for checking us out. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you to all of our returning listeners coming back as Cody and I continue to talk Texans here on this Tuesday. On the other side of the screen or the other side of the microphone, Texans credential media member, Sports Illustrated's own beat reporter for the Houston Texans, Cody Davis. I am your Texans football analyst, John, some sports guy, Hickman. On today's show, we have a game show we're going to end off with. If you guys have been watching or listening for a while now, every now and then we like to do a game show. The free agency games. So that's what we're going to play. Should John Greenard get tagged for a 1-year proven deal? And I think that's important to talk about. We'll open up today's show with, is it smart to tag Dalton Schultz? Before we talk about Dalton Schultz, I do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your purchase. A lot of the numbers to look at for today's show, Cody. So let's go ahead and talk about Dalton Schultz. Should the Houston Texans tag him? Is it smart? Or I think the question will come down to that tag money, can that be used in other areas?
Yeah, and the reason why we're talking about tags, for those of you guys who don't know, today actually opened up the window for teams around the league to franchise tag one player on their respective rosters. And of course, we're looking at players who are scheduled to hit the free agency market. As of right now, the Houston Texans have 25 players set to hit free agency. But John, out of those 25 players, I'm looking at 2 players who can possibly be a candidate to get franchise tag. And out of those 2 players, we're looking at Dalton Schultz and Jonathan Greenard. So we're going to say Jonathan Greenard for the second segment. But let's open up with Dalton Schultz, because when you take a look at the money, when you take a look at the production, I think Dalton Schultz might be the number one candidate that might get franchise tags in terms of what the Houston Texans can do. Because first and foremost, John, Dalton Schultz, like a lot of players, the number one thing that you're always concerned about is durability and health. And I think outside of his second season in the league with the Dallas Cowboys, Dalton Schultz has been fairly healthy throughout his career. I know this past season, that probably was the only negative for Dalton. He kept getting hampered by nagging injuries that caused him to sit out a couple times. However, when Dalton Schultz was out there on that field, he was definitely one of the Houston Texans' top players. And look, the one thing about Dalton Schultz, he's always going to be consistent, and he is always going to be one of the top tight ends in the league. And as of right now, when you take a look at this free agency market, John, we talked about this last week. I don't know too many tight ends that I will take over Dalton Schultz as of right now. When you look at the guys who are actually available, Dalton Schultz over the last 4 years has recorded an average of 658 yards, 18 touchdowns. Last season alone basically matched that production with 635 receiving yards on 59 catches with 5 touchdowns. As of right now, if the Houston Texans were to place a franchise tag on Dalton Schultz, that is a projected $12 million. However, if they want to go the route and resign him, let's say for a 3-year deal, you're looking at a situation where Dalton Schultz will cost the Houston Texans $11.5 million over the next, let's say, 3 years. So you're looking roughly around $34 to $35 million. So John, hearing those numbers, knowing that when healthy, he's consistent, he is one of the top players at his position. You already know that you have chemistry between him and CJ. He is undoubtedly the best tight end on the Houston Texans roster as of right now. Would it make sense for the Texans to just say, you know what? We're going to place a franchise tag on you and let's kick this can down the road, let's say to 2025, and let's revisit this. What would you say? Oh, my goodness.
Come with me, if you will. So if you guys are not watching, if you're listening, I just put on white gloves because I want to usher y'all to some common sense. If you have the money to tag them, get the deal done. Because wasting a tag on Dalton Schultz, I think, is hustling backwards. Wasting a tag on Dalton Schultz is asking for the building fund and using it for strippers. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of money. I've seen it. If you have the money for Dalton Schultz, again, go ahead and get the long-term deal locked in, right? Because what you don't want to do is waste a tag on Dalton Schultz and then miss out on being able to tag who we're going to talk about, John Greenard. Also, I would say this: if the Texans do tag him, then I don't see them being able to work out a long-term deal because that doesn't necessarily show for an aging player who has had success in this league for at least 4 seasons now. I would say maybe 3, but he's been successful so far to this point in his career that you guys are now 100% invested in me. But overall, I don't have much to say. I just feel like if you're going to spend, was it $12 million for the franchise for this year?
Yeah, projected $12 million, and his market value as of right now is 11.5.
It makes much more sense to go ahead and get a deal done. Now I'm on a train. I've been saying I think that you could go an opposite direction than Dalton Schultz, but he has got the endorsement of his franchise quarterback. He also has come out and endorsed himself and the city by saying he loves being here. He wants to come back. So I can see them looking at the chemistry and everything that goes into that relationship on the field and off the field that makes sense to bring him back. But it does not make sense to tag a player because where do we rank Dalton Schultz right now in terms of at the end of the season? Where do you rank Schultz as a priority player? Is he over John Greenard?
No, he's definitely not over John Greenard. But I view it this way. I feel like it might be in their best interest to tag him only because, John, and this goes back to what you and I talked about last week. You would have an opportunity to prioritize drafting a tight end and giving him this year to develop, get his feet wet in the league, and then that way, going into the 2025 season, you can move on from Dalton Schultz because he'll be older and you won't be tying too much long-term money into an aging tight end. Now, I get it. This whole entire time we've been sitting here talking about, building around CJ, making sure he has weapons that he's comfortable with and that he could utilize and all that other good stuff. But for me personally, I just look at it more so of I feel like the Texans would get better. The Texans will probably get better value for their money by committing to Dalton Schultz on a short-term deal versus a long-term deal, especially considering that they still got to address. I was going to say, especially considering that the tight end unit is still a priority that they can address in the draft because, look, I love Brevin Jordan, and I still think there's something in TQ, but we still don't know exactly if we can trust him to take to him as tight end number 1 if that opportunity has to present itself.
Fair. No, that's a very fair argument, and I think that argument is Schultz's best argument. But my argument to that is how many franchise tags can you hand out?
Just one.
And if I look at who's available, and if I look at the pecking order of who was the most impactful player on this team, we're going to talk about a guy in the very next segment where I got to look and say, I think JG52 deserves it. Hey, guys, you shouldn't have to worry when you buy your next ticket to the next big event near you. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy all of your Rockets, Astros, music, comedy, theater events near you that are coming to your city. Game Time makes it easy and fast for you. Killer last minute deals, all in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. With zone deals, you pick the section, and Game Time picks the seats for big time savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. And if you find tickets in a section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use promo code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers, as we continue to have our Franchise Talk Tuesday, talking about the Texans. There's a lot of T's in that. We shift our attention over to the defensive side of the ball, a player that the Houston Texans drafted a few years back, a player that has seen, Anthony Weaver, Romeo Cornell,
Lovie Smith,
Miles Smith, whoever was in DC last year, now this year with Matt Burke. But we look at John Greenard, who has been through a little bit of ups and downs since he arrived in the NFL. But I think for the most part, as a former third-round pick, he's blossomed into his role. We're talking about him now in the sense of, should he be highlighted? I mean, should he be franchise tagged? We're highlighting him as one of the Houston Texans' better players this past season, 12.5 sacks, all career highs across the board. Should he get tagged for the 1-year prove deal? And Cody, again, guys, Cody has the numbers. We're going to talk about it, but I like the fact that the conversation is a 1-year prove it deal.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's what it's going to come down to, because when I look at Jonathan Greenard, I'm all for him coming back, whether it be a franchise tag. But for the sake of this argument, I would rather see them get a long-term deal done. However, John, the one thing about John Greenard has never really been his talent. We all knew that he had talent. We always saw the talent in the potential. But the number one issue surrounding Jonathan Greenard was his durability. Can he stay healthy? We saw that he stayed fairly healthy last year. We saw that literally resulted into a career year for JG. And that's why you see a lot of people conflicted about what should the Houston Texans do with Jonathan Greenard. If they franchise tag him, John, and I'm wondering if this is going to change your mind. If they franchise tag Jonathan Greenard, it's going to cost them about a projected $20.2 million.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
However,
that's a
you
lot.
take a look at the market value. Let's say 4 years, 54 million. You're looking at a projected annual salary of 13 to 14 million.
See, and listeners and viewers, that's what I did not take into account, honestly. Looking at the pros and cons of tagging Schultz or tagging Greenard. And so I apologize, because $20 million is a lot.
But
for a player who hasn't finished the season.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but what I will say is this, John, and this is why I want to look at it as a 1-year prove it deal, because 1, can Jonathan Greenard replicate the success? 2, can he stay healthy? 3, I hope he don't turn into Whitney Merciless and you only have a good year during his contract season. But 4, and most importantly, if you move on from Jonathan Greenard and you go out and get one of the top defensive linemen, this is what you're going to have to shell out, about 20 to 22 million, and that's going to be tied into the next 4 seasons. So, which way are you going?
And that's the point. Again, I don't think Dalton Schultz is worth tagging. And we're looking at the conversation of Schultz, because this is basically Schultz versus John Greenard. I would still tag Greenard over Dalton Schultz. And this is how you put it, and I like it. If it's Greenard or somebody else, I think Greenard may end up. You can look at that $20 million and say instead of yourself, that's an overpay. But somebody else, if it's a top defensive lineman, it will be primed to make $20 million either close to it or a little over it. The prove it deal, again, to your point, we can give you that money this year, but after that, we're not tied into another $20 million the following year, which makes a lot of sense for Houston. And I'm not necessarily worried about the cap. And honestly, lately, guys, we talk about the cap space. I know this is off-putting, but I've been kind of dialing back on how much I think Houston should go after Saquon, because I believe that $11 million can be shared between 2 or 3 players to fill the roster. There are some guys coming out in this. I like Saquon, but there are some guys coming out in this draft. If you look at re-signing Motor, you get that offensive line tighter and righter, and pair Motor with a younger back that can do a little bit more of the things that you want to do in this system, then that saves you $11 million projected. I'm going to stick to it and say I think it makes more sense to tag John Greenard than I think it does to tag Dalton Schultz.
I'm going to say I would much rather see the Texans commit long term to John Greenard.
Yes.
Only because, look, one, you'll come out cheaper, especially for this upcoming season. But 2, and most importantly, I also believe that the Texans, once again, they could get a lot more value for their buck if they tie it into Jonathan Greenard for the long term. And look, at the end of the day, the one negative about JG throughout his whole entire years of right now has been durability. However, when he's out there, the young man can ball. Speaking of Devin Singletary, really quick, when you look at the Texans free agency list and you look at guys who could potentially get tagged, there's only one other guy that I could see possibly getting tagged, and that's Devin Singletary. However, John, I think this is real easy. The franchise tag for him would be like $11.5 million. The market value for him, if they resign him, you're looking at like $5.5 to $6 million. So, to your point about Saquon, get the deal done. But John, I also believe, man, if they resign Devin Singletary, then I could literally see them moving on from the idea of bringing in Saquon Barkley. But I do like what you just said. You could use that 11 million to retain one of these other free agents that you got that you can possibly use, i.e. like a Khalil Davis at the top of my head, possibly Desmond King, or whoever the case might be, or you could use that 11 million to go out and get one of those mid-level free agents that can actually help your team's depth. So I do like that idea. However, I'm just a Saquon Barkley fan, so I love this.
I love Saquon. I love him in this game. I really do. We've talked about it a lot here on the show. But as I get down back to reality, and I think to myself, they will have tough decisions to make. We just saw a Super Bowl where the Super Bowl winning team was led by Isaiah Pacheco, who's a 7th rounder running back. Right. The last highest paid running back to win a Super Bowl, was a very long time ago. Motor can help you get it done. He rushed for nearly 1,000 yards this year, and that's on top of the carries he didn't get. I like Bucky Irvin out of Oregon. I like him a lot. I even think there's some free agent options out there. Jeff Wilson, who has played in the San Fran scheme, who can come in and help this team out too. $11 million for Saquon can potentially be 3 different players altogether. So don't be like Jaylen Brown. Be like Carl Anthony Towns. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets if your winning $5 bet wins. That's $150 in your pocket if your bet wins. Bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, and exclusive props, much more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and shoot your shot. Not like Jaylen Brown, of course, but shoot your shot like maybe Dame Lillard or Stephen Curry. FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. It's been a while, but it's time for the Locked On Texans game show here on the podcast before we close out the free agency game show. And Cody, what will we be talking about in this game show?
We're just going to be asking questions about the 25 free agents that the Houston Texans have. Whether or not you will want them back, how do you want them back, or should you just let them walk out the door? Or for this one question I have, is this idea been floating around my head? Should they bring this person back and possibly trade this other person? You never know. You never know.
Can y'all wait to hear one of these? All right, let's get started with the game show. 3, 2, 1, 1.5. All right, I'm gonna start it off real quick. So the Houston Texans have a lot of pending free agents, and one of the guys that I would like to see back, regardless of how any of you guys feel, I know that he's getting up in age. He's turning 32 this year, but on a very good, doable, team-friendly deal. Steven Nelson. Cody, would you want him back?
I'm going to say yes, but it goes back to what you and I talked about last week. We could bring you back, but you have to be willing to accept a lesser role. Let's say corner. I put it just like I did last week. You go out and let's say you sign you another corner, or better yet, draft another one of the top corners in this year's draft. And you let him be what Shaq Griffin was, what Shaq Griffin should have been for this team moving forward.
I like it. 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 All right, Cody, it's on you in 3, 2, 1, 1.5.
All right, John. One of the biggest things that's been on my mind this offseason, should the Houston Texans bring back offensive lineman George Fent? And if so, how do you see the Texans utilizing him and shifting the rest of this offensive line? Now, keep in mind, George Fent do want to start.
I loved what George Fent did this past season. Had a chance to talk to him in the locker room, and he said, they got to work it out. He's a guy that I really would like to see back here in Houston personally, but do I think they get it done? I don't know, Jim. I don't think he returns back to Houston. I really don't. I think Fent played his way into a very decent contract with an NFL team. Fent is, how old is Fent? Fent is
I want to say 31, if I'm not mistaken.
He's not old, but he turned 32 by the time the season roll around, and you definitely want to get you a nice little contract. And I don't think it'll come for the Houston Texans.
All right,
let's go. I got another question. Y'all ready? Let's go in 3, 2, 1, 1.5. Okay, so check this out, guys. The Houston Texans have Sheldon Rankins, Derek Barnett, Tier Tart, Hassan Ridgeway. Those defensive linemen are all going to be free agents in a couple of weeks. Of those four, Rankins, Barnett, Jerry Hughes, of course, Tier Tart, Hassan Ridgeway, so 5. Are there 2 or more players of that bunch that you would like to retain back for the Houston Texans? And if so, who?
I would say 2, Sheldon Rankins and Derek Barnett. Looking at 2 guys who literally helped this Texans defensive line throughout the season, especially Derek Barnett. John, we talked about this a couple weeks ago as well. The one thing about Derek Barnett is I think he actually helped the Houston Texans get home with their sacks a lot more. Remember, prior to his arrival, Coach D'Amico Ryan said if there was one thing he wanted to fix on the defensive side of the ball, it was the Houston Texans defensive line's ability to get home and complete their sacks on quarterbacks. Because remember, at one time, there was like top 5 in pressures, but there was like towards the bottom of the league in sacks. You bring in Derek Barnett, and you brought some other guys there as well, but you brought in Derek Barnett and the impact that he made on that defensive line. Next thing you know, you blink your eyes, and they literally set a franchise record, I believe, with like 45 or 46 sacks for the season. So definitely Derek Barnett. And with Sheldon Rankins, you're looking at a veteran, a guy who is one of the leaders in that locker room, but most importantly, still has a lot of good football left in the tank.
Yeah, he'll be 30 by the time the season starts, and his projected annual salary, according to Spot Rack, so give or take on these numbers, $9.9 million. I would like to see Sheldon Rankins return back. Okay. We got one more, Cody. What we got?
Yes, sir.
3, 2, 1, 1.5.
All right, John, you have talked a lot about this linebacking core throughout the season. First, especially at the start of the season, you was critical of this linebacking core. However, I want to say at this point, their second best linebacker, Blake Cashman, is one of the 25 players set to hit free agency.
Yeah.
Would you like to see Blake Cashman back, or would you like to see them let Blake Cashman walk and you try to replace his services either through the draft or signing another linebacker?
Guys, do not kill me, because I think Blake Cashman had a very good year. What was Blake Cashman's numbers?
I think he led the team in sacks.
Blake, did he have like 18 tackles in one game this year?
He had multiple games of like 10 or more tackles. I want to say like 3.
Let's see. He had 15 one game, 10 one game, 19 one game. He ended the year off with 2 sacks. He had a sack in the playoffs, 10 tackles in one of the playoff games. He ended the year off with 1 interception, 5 pass deflections. Blake had an amazing year. Finished the year off with 106 total sacks. But I think Blake Cashman is a product of D'Amico Ryan's. And I think that, and this is no disrespect to Blake Cashman whatsoever, if Houston can find a way to get him back here in Houston in that building for a reasonable cost, I think they should. But I think if you look at the bigger picture, and if there's an opportunity for you to upgrade from Blake Cashman, again, regardless of the 20-plus pending free agents, they're still going to have an opportunity to hit on maybe 2 big free agents. If you could upgrade from them, you do that. And if you could bring in a guy that has more talent than Blake Cashman, you do that. And I think he was a product of great coaching, which you always want your player to be. Long story short, I would rather for Houston to go out there and replace Cashman in free agency.
What about franchise tagging him?
I'm not franchise tagging Blake.
You don't know how much it costs first.
How much is it?
$22.5 million.
I'm not franchise tagging Blake Cashman. Not doing it. You can hit it one more time. It's just not happening. Right now.
Oh my goodness.
Devin White is a free agent. A lot of people are like, well, Devin White sucked last year. I think a lot went into that. But talent-wise, at 26 years old, Devin White can still give a team some very good snaps. Patrick Queen, free agent. All right. Willie Gay is a free agent. There's some free agents out there that I think Houston can bring in and either ascend that position, like, just do much better than Blake did, or can give you that same production. So
that makes sense.
Yeah, I would look at moving on from Blake Cashman. These are my thoughts.
All right.
Thank y'all for tagging them. Thank y'all for watching it or listening to this episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Do us a favor, please subscribe, like, and comment to the Locked On Texans podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Texans podcast as well at Locked On Texans, and give me a follow at John_Hickman12.
And as always, I'm your host, Cody M. Davis. Please remember to follow me on Twitter at CodyDavis_24. Once again, that's Cody COTYDAVIS_24. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, peace.